Chapter 2. "I swear, Papa," Troy said urgently at the supper table that night, as Mama dished out their meager meal: boiled potatoes and wheat bread spread with an extremely thin layer of strawberry jam from last year's harvest. There had been no meat for over a month. Papa had often joked that they would be eating the dog soon if he was unable to find a deer or rabbit to shoot. Troy didn't think it was that funny. "I'm telling the truth." Papa sighed as Mama sat down beside him. It was the cue to start eating, but even though Troy was ravenous, he didn't eat. He was too nervous. He had the feeling that Papa didn't believe him, and that was bad. "He was by the tree, huh?" "Yes," Troy insisted. Charlotte, who was the oldest, laughed unkindly as her hand darted forward and snagged the largest piece of bread from the basket. "You're such a damn liar, Troy." "Language," Mama said sharply. "Ladies don't talk like that, Charlotte." "Sorry," Charlotte said, sounding anything but. She flipped her curly blonde hair behind her and grinned as she ate. With rising panic, Troy glanced around the table and saw that everyone had the same expression on their face. Careful and yet disinterested, as if they thought he was fibbing, but were unsure of how to put it to him. No, not all of them. His other sister, Maybelle, was giving him a strange look, half sympathetic and half enthralled. She was 14 and was Troy's favorite sister by far. She was kind and shy, not mean like Charlotte. He hoped that she'd believe him. The dining room was cramped, but with the gas lamps lit, casting a glow around the room that Mama had scrubbed clean and hung nice lace curtains over the windows, it was sort of nice. But Troy hardly noticed. He was looking desperately at his father. Papa was a big man, with arms that were built like boulders. He had a scrubby black beard and wise, sharp eyes. He chewed his bread thoughtfully for a moment. "So you're saying this boy disappeared?" Troy nodded. Charlotte snorted, but he ignored her. "Are you sure you weren't just seeing things? A trick of the light, maybe?" Troy shook his head. "No, Papa, I promise. He was there, and he just vanished." "That's enough," Mama said. Troy's eyes widened. Mama's voice, usually soft and sweet, was sharp. She tossed her napkin across her empty plate and fixed her youngest son with a steely glare. "We've all had to make the best of this, Troy Stevens." He winced as she used his full name. She only did that when he was really in trouble. "You've been moping around here all day, not helping your father or your sisters or me. We've been trying to make this house fit to live in while you run around, doing whatever it is that you're doing. So I don't know if you're just making this up to try and make us move again, or if you just want attention. But you quit it. Do you hear me?" He lowered his eyes, outwardly chastised but inwardly seething. He could feel the eyes of the entire family on him. "Yes, Mama. I mean it. No more foolish stories." She stood up and began to gather the dishes up. The meal had been so tiny that it had taken less than 5 minutes for everyone to eat. "Now you come in here and help me with the dishes, Troy, and stay out of trouble." Defeated, he stood up and joined her at the sink. Resentment glowed in his heart. "I know what I saw. I was telling the truth. I'll prove it." "Mama said no," Maybelle said nervously. Her eyes shifted around and she crossed her arms against her chest. "No," Troy corrected her. "Mama said I couldn't tell stories anymore. She didn't say we couldn't go out to the tree." "Still," Maybelle said. Her eyes were downcast and she refused to look at Troy. "I thought you said that you believed me." Maybelle finally looked up, and Troy saw that she was more than just nervous. She was scared. "I do. That's why I don't want to go over there." It was the next afternoon. Mama and Papa had kept them busy with chores all morning, but around noon, Troy had finally gotten the opportunity to speak to his sister. Maybelle had whispered that she didn't think that Troy was lying about the boy he'd seen. Troy had been immensely relieved to discover that not everybody in the house thought he was a liar. They were standing in the field. It was another hot, dry day, with not a single cloud in the sky to to break up the blistering rays of sunlight. Troy squinted. There was the tree in the distance, looking as innocent as ever. "Maybe we shouldn't go," Mabel said nervously. Troy felt a little impatient. He liked Mabel very much, but sometimes she made him feel like the big brother instead of the youngest. "Come on," he said as he took the first steps toward the tree. "You promised." She bit her lip, looking frightened, but finally she followed him. They approached the tree. Troy examined it closely. His face fell. There was nothing there. Mabel felt relieved, but her fear didn't dissipate. There was something in the air, which was suddenly much cooler around the tree, like a pocket of cold water in a warm lake. She shivered. She didn't like it. Troy felt it too, only what he felt was a wave of foreboding, so powerful that it was almost like a fever. Then it passed, and he only whistled disgustedly through his teeth. "I swear to God, Mabel, he was right here," and he pointed to the tree trunk. She let out a shaky laugh, and with a sense of false bravado that she didn't really feel, said, "Maybe Mama was right. Maybe you were seeing things." "I wasn't," he said stubbornly. They stood around the tree for a moment longer. Troy stared at his feet and sighed. "I just feel like there's something going on here. Something that's not right." "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I don't know." He took a deep breath and continued, "I guess what I mean is—" But he never finished his sentence, for at that moment Mabel let out an ear-splitting scream and took several hurried steps backward. She tripped on the hem of her dress and fell, but her eyes never left the tree. Her face drained of color, and Troy followed her gaze. His heart leapt in his throat. The boy was back. He was standing beside the tree, with one hand on the trunk. The purplish-black mark around his neck was extremely prominent. He wasn't alone. Standing on the other side of the tree was a girl maybe 2 or 3 years younger than Mabel, and a woman who still retained traces of great beauty in her careworn face. There was an expression of great sorrow in her eyes. The same marks were on their necks. "This can't be happening," Troy whispered. From behind him, he could hear his older sister whimpering in fear. The woman's lips were moving, as if she were trying to speak, but no words were coming out. Troy frowned. He was afraid, terrified as a matter of fact, but he was young enough to still be able to feel curiosity in his fear, and he wondered what the ghostly woman was trying to say to him. Also, he didn't get a bad feeling from them, like they meant him any harm. "Are you trying to talk?" he asked. Finally, he caught a snatch of speech. It was faint, though, very faint, as if she were speaking through a very long tunnel. "You woke him up," she whispered sadly. "Woke who? How?" "Him," she said simply. The sadness in her voice was soft and unmistakable. "You must take your family and leave this place before he finds the one from whom he can work his will." "I'm seeing things," Mabel whispered, her eyes fixed on the woman. "This can't be real." The woman sighed. It was a sound that sent a chill running down Troy's spine. "His evil knows no bounds. It wasn't enough." But then her voice trailed out again, as if it slipped behind a veil that normally separated the world of the living from the world of the dead. Suddenly a black shadow snaked its way from underneath the tree. Troy's eyes widened and his hair stood on end. It was a terrible shadow, full of death and evil intent, and it grew longer, longer and longer still, stretching across the brittle grass. It was heading right towards the farmhouse. Then it was gone. Troy and Mabel scanned the ground fearfully, looking for the shadow, but saw nothing out of place. "What was that?" Mabel said in a hushed voice. "I don't know." Troy turned back towards the tree. His jaw dropped and his fear kicked up a notch, rising from mere fear to terror. The woman, girl, and little boy were gone, but in their place were 3 nooses dangling from the lowest branch of the tree. They swung gently, and Troy found himself unable to look away. Two of the nooses were very small. He thought he knew now how the family got the marks on their necks. Like the gentle caress, he heard one last ghostly whisper before the nooses disappeared, leaving no trace of their existence behind. "In the attic. Look in the attic."